This would be the easiest sermon in the world because it's one of my favorite stories. But what's really more important is the letter to the Corinthians that Paul wrote. And that again is one of my favorite opportunities to tell you about all of your gifts. But today, unfortunately, there's something more that we have to talk about. And of course, I know you've been reading the paper and or listening to the news, and you now think that there is a big problem in the Anglican communion. And of course, I've read them carefully, all of the comments, all of the reactions, all of the statements, and knowing that we had expected something that might be different to occur at this primates meeting, I was prepared. Now that being said, I was prepared for Jesus to step in and let them understand what they needed to know about who we are and how we believe and follow Jesus. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen exactly the way we all had hoped it would, or prayed that it would. Some of the history that you need to know is that this is one of those few times when all of the primates, there are 38 of them, they are presiding bishops for their particular part of the world. So we have elected one back in July. His name is Michael Curry. We prayed for him. We understood that he had a very, very strong understanding about our role in the Anglican Communion, because the Episcopal Church is very different than all of these other provinces that are represented by all these other bishops. And the reason we know that is because in the last 9 years when Bishop Catherine Jeffers Surrey was the presiding bishop, she was excluded from much of the conversation. Respectfully, but she was not included, welcome in a warm way. And that was because, and we understood it, this is an old man's club. And so she stood out. And knowing that Michael Curry was of the same heritage, and certainly of the same training and understanding theologically as the rest of the Anglican Communion, there was a hope that that would be what presided, that would be what was obvious. And so they went together to pray at the invitation of the Archbishop of Canterbury and to discern. And instead, they reacted. And so the action that they took came out at the end of the week. Unfortunately, as I read in one of the statements, things were leaked. Well, of course, things get leaked all the time. This happens even at General Convention for us, and it happens at all of the other opportunities when all of these bishops are together, someone has to say something. And the bishop from Uganda decided to leave, and that created the first of a snowball rolling, that something was wrong. But I can't tell you that something is wrong, because I don't think anything is wrong. We look at the sanction that was given, which is for us to be excluded for the next 3 years in certain conversations. And one of the things that came out of this final statement is that it affirms that we still walk together. So we have not left the Anglican Communion. They have not pushed us away. They have not told us we don't belong anymore. And we need to be really careful that we don't say we don't want to belong anymore. Because we do. We do share much of what this particular group gets together to discern. Of course, we think that there are experts that would like to tell us all of the truth that they understand about Christ. That Christ made statements. That Christ's life led us in a different way. And that we have turned our back on that. Our position is we've embraced what Jesus wanted, what Jesus taught, what God intended. And that's what's so difficult for us to understand, is that they can't see that. They are overwhelmed with their own prejudices, their own tradition, their own misunderstanding. And I know this for a fact because I was in Egypt. And the one bishop who's actually had a statement that was was on the public news. His name is Morna Anis, and he and I had a personal conversation. And he asked me if I was going to be a spokesperson for same-sex relationships, and that it was an offshoot of the fact that Jeannie Robinson at the time had been consecrated a bishop. And I had been already forewarned by my bishop to say that I did not represent the Church of the United States. And that is true. I'm not a representative. I'm not a spokesperson. But I asked him some questions that I needed to have him answer, because it was actually important for me to understand better what he felt was the difficulty. And as we continued to talk, he explained to me that they were working diligently at unity in Africa. They were trying very hard to get all of the congregations together in worship. So that meant that he was including Greek Orthodox, the Coptic Church, all of the other Christian faiths that would interact together. It also meant that when they had any kind of interfaith activity, he was the leader, he was the coordinator. And because of our action in the United States, the Muslim population, Muslim representatives, would not participate. And so what he explained to me was that even though we might be right, it was causing them a great deal of difficulty to make headway in the world for unity. I understood that and thought to myself, you are right. Because part of what you're telling me is that even though I know from what I have studied that in Africa there were indeed pockets of lives where there were people who had alternate lifestyle, but they were never recognized. They were kept a secret. And then that was the real issue, is that we made it public. Had we kept it a secret and not disclosed who Gene Robinson was, it would have made no difference. He would have lived his life. The rest of the world would never have known. Except that it became really obvious to us that their prejudice was interfering with what Jesus had intended. That wasn't the first time that we've had to deal with that. In 1946, the first female priests were ordained. And from that moment on, the African Church has rejected that thought. As a matter of fact, the actual church in England had a very difficult time until just recently, I think even within the last 10 years, ordaining women into the priesthood. So we are leaders in the world. We take chances. We make statements. We take action. And we make others very uncomfortable. I think that that is what Jesus intended for us to do. I know that we are not outside the Anglican communion. And I know that there are people within the United States and the Episcopal Church who are really reeling in joy that this happened, because it verifies what they have felt all along, that we made a mistake. And look, the world thinks that. Except that at the end of the week, the statement that came out says that we walk together. So I think they understand that change is going to have a long and difficult time to take place in a country or countries where there has not been that kind of awakening. They understand Jesus from a different point of view. And you know, if you listen to some of our pronouncing preachers who get on the TV and want to make a really strong statement, they accuse all of the people who don't follow their pattern or their method or their beliefs as being heretics and sinners. And we have to smile back and say, but we know what Jesus wants us to do. say that with a lot of love, mainly because I know what I've experienced in my life. And I don't agree with shame as a tool, or guilt as a tool to serve God. But I think we as a congregation, as a church body, understand is that God is welcoming of all people. And that's what makes us different. Does it mean we're going to stand out in the world? Most definitely. How does it tie into today's lesson? All of the gifts that are mentioned in Corinthians are in this room. You each have those gifts. And that's what we as a church believe Christ has given us. And when we live into those gifts, we serve God. We do stand out. We can be persecuted, but we are one of God's creations that has made it clear that we understand what that gospel really says. And we will continue to do that. And through these next 3 years when we are supposedly not involved, here's the joy. We've already started being asked by those other organizations that we are supposed to avoid to please be involved, that they need our thinking. One of the things that came out, and I realize if you've read them carefully, the reactionaries immediately said, let's withhold all of our support, our financial support. I immediately got very irate, because what is the bottom line? Money? Or is the bottom line understanding? A mutual understanding of Christ's message. And eventually, as I continued reading, those people were not necessarily chided, but certainly the explanation came to them that we can do other things and show how well we understand Christ. That makes it difficult because it means we have to extend ourselves beyond the pain and the hurt. We aren't hurting. We are doing what Christ asked us to do, and that is to love everyone. Let us join together as we affirm our faith.